Hello, I'm Jennifer Thompson.
And I'm Chad Thompson.
And we are your hosts of The Premise, where we get to the story behind the storyteller. And this season, we've got some amazing storytellers lined up, and we really appreciate you listening. Be sure to subscribe and rate us wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening. Let's roll.
Autobots, roll out!
Hello and welcome to The Premise. Today, Chad and I have the pleasure of speaking with Dan and Sandy Smith of Smith Publicity. You might remember them from episode 36. If you did not hear that episode, I highly recommend that you go back and take a listen. We got into the nitty-gritty of book publicity and Smith Publicity's philosophy on book publicity. You know, Smith is one of the few book publicity firms in the nation that markets both traditional and indie published books and self-published titles. So Dan founded Smith Publicity in 1997, and they've been doing innovative work and staying ahead of the curve in their ever dynamic, constantly evolving industry that is publishing. So Dan, Sandy, welcome to The Premise.
Hello.
Hello, Jennifer. We're so happy to be here again.
Yay. You know, we asked you back because your episode got so many listens and has been so popular. I thought, you know what? So much has changed in the world, let alone publishing. Since we talked, we need to kind of come back and see what you've been up to and what has changed. So how are you two?
We're good. But when did the last episode air? I can't remember.
In the before times.
You know, I didn't even look at it. I want to say it was season 2. We're in season 4. So yeah, season 2, about 2 years ago. It was right before COVID, actually.
Oh gosh, what a time that was.
So yeah, nothing's changed.
Nothing's changed at all. Yeah,
nothing's changed. It's same old. So when we had what we call the party of the century, right before COVID. Dan, if you want to say what happened on February 29th, 2020.
Oh, my son Alex had his bar mitzvah, and like Sandy said, it was leap year day of February, and if you remember, there was word was going around about the virus, and then literally 5 days later, things shut down.
Wow!
So I think he had the last bar mitzvah before COVID.
Literally the last one.
Yeah,
and no one got sick.
No one got sick.
Thank goodness.
No one got sick. Yes, it wasn't too prevalent here at February 29th, but obviously 2 weeks later, we shut our office down, and we were always poised to work remote. Most of our people are all spread out all over the country, but we do have a core office, and we were very fortunate in that we were always hybrid, and we've been hybrid for 20 years plus. So that shift, we were very fortunate that our publicists could keep going with their work while the world was rapidly changing around us. But here we are back, and there are some good things that happened because of COVID in the book publicity world, and some sad things like the demise of Book Expo America, and BookCon too, which we liked but didn't love as much from a business perspective.
Sure, same.
But yes, it was a lot of fun. But most of our clients weren't dressing up in costumes and really enjoying the literary life. Although that's where, especially my kids when they were younger, we would have liked to have participated. But things are starting to really come back from an industry perspective. But even from an opportunity perspective, there have been such shifts. Like, for example, we really liked that broadcast media, national TV, were doing interviews by Zoom, right? Because that kind of democratized a bit of the opportunities where people who weren't living in the big cities, especially around New York City, had more opportunity to talk about their book, their passion, their work when Zoom was there. So we loved it, and authors didn't have to travel and fly and change schedules. And as you can imagine, over the years before COVID, we had authors who would fly into New York City for their big interview, be in the studio, be in their green room.
Yeah, real green rooms.
Real green rooms,
Yeah.
with the fancy fruit. And then they would just get shut down because of a breaking news story. So
Oh,
it was
wow.
so
Yeah.
so that kind of it was so devastating. It didn't happen that often, but it didn't have to happen often enough that we had to really prepare our clients that this is a potential outcome when you go to the national shows. So having it, during COVID, have the Zoom opportunities was fantastic because it just allowed people to show up very quickly from their
Yeah.
schedule perspective. And you could be sitting on an island somewhere enjoying life and then pop in to do national TV, then go right back to your daily life. Now, what's interesting is TV for authors is going back to in person. So we're now having to shift again. But that's what life is in publishing, shifts and shifts.
Yeah, absolutely.
And buyouts. Or attempted buyouts
Well,
that didn't go through.
Yes, that did not go through. That was fascinating, wasn't it?
Oh, narrowly dodged bullet there, I think.
Jeez.
Yes.
Well,
yes.
I kind of, not to steal your thunder, Chad, but I kind of want to go back to how Zoom has really changed our world, especially for like smaller authors and smaller presses and accessibility. Everyone uses Zoom now. It's not like you have to learn, you just know how, because if you wanted to have access to humanity, you needed to learn, and people did, all ages. And,
Right.
On our podcast, we interview people all over the world, and Warwick's one of our coolest bookstores here. It's a small family-owned bookstore here in La Jolla in San Diego. They have me interview authors in England, whereas before they didn't have access to those authors because they were all in person, right? So that's been, and they're going to hold on to that. Like that's one of the things that they took as a positive out of the COVID years. And I hope that the same might be true for some broadcasts, maybe not national, but it's very interesting in terms of access and a little bit more equity, right?
And
Exactly.
I can't remember if before COVID, if I used Zoom. I can't remember.
Yeah,
How often it
exactly.
was used.
Yeah.
It was interesting. It was kind of annoying because now I have to be on camera, and where it was, we were just used to phone calls with people. And now we wouldn't go back. And I was just explaining to someone yesterday that when I'm talking to an author, I so prefer that communication as we're talking about their goals. Why did you write this book? Why at this time in your life? And I'm explaining, book publicity and the things that they have to do and what we could potentially do. And I can see in their eyes if they are completely lost and this is brand new information, or if they're like, yes, I get this, or if they're distracted, like, I've got to wrap this up because they're in a different world. Just little communication like that
the body language
helps me better understand how to present some pretty complex topics to when it's a brand new, people brand new to this crazy world of book marketing and book publicity. So yeah, Zoom's been helpful for that. But I remember attending an event for an author who was from England, actually, doing a reading, and people from all over the world were able to attend instead of just the neighborhood bookstore crowd.
That's right.
So it really was. I'm hoping that never goes away.
I agree. What else I like about it is a lot of these interviews are now recorded and they're out there forever. So I can look up an interview from a small bookstore in, Minneapolis or Des Moines and see a really cool interview that would have otherwise been gone forever, right? So now it's there for posterity.
Yeah.
Which helps the author. Then we've got more links. It's better for SEO. It's better for that online visibility and their overall branding. So it's pretty cool.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So did things slow down or speed up for you?
At first, go ahead. You talk, Dan.
Well, I mean, at first, I think Sandy was going to say there was kind of a state of paralysis in the industry, like in the world, I guess, for a bit, where it was very uncertain, and with most businesses, and that was a very scary time because things kind of just, I didn't say they stopped, but very much slowed down. Everybody's trying to figure out what is going to happen and how things are going to move on. But after that, we did quite well. Sandy, if you want to talk about that.
Sure. We got a little bit creative in terms of
course you
the
did.
kind.
That's totally your brand. I love it.
and the kind of ways that we were helping authors, which kind of goes to a bigger part of our services now. It's consulting services. So before, when we would work with an author, we would just jump in and do our media outreach. That's what we do, and that's our bread and butter, and that's what we get excited to do. And sometimes when we'd start with an author, like, oh gosh, if we could have just talked to them 6 months before, because they need a better website. They needed to be talking about their book on their social platform 3 months ago, 6 months ago. They want to be speakers, but they don't even have a speaker reel or a page or a link or a tab that says they're speakers. But one of their primary goal is, generate speaking opportunities, but they weren't prepared. So what we ended up doing is having kind of conversations about, okay, there's media, and that's what we do, the bread and butter, but there are other things that we can really help authors to support their overall goals. Whether it was, okay, let's talk about your Amazon Author Central page. You don't have that set up. It's your website on Amazon. It's great, as you said earlier, for SEO, for search. Let's help you set that up. Or giving them guides on book awards, Goodreads giveaways.
Nice.
How to use your media placements in your socials, your platform, your bio on Amazon. All kinds of things that are kind of on the outskirts of media outreach, but are important support that just helps the media see their credentials, to see their platform, and helps with their longer term plans of audience growth and branding and who they are. So that's what we did, is whether we did book awards or helped them compose emails to their network. You have all these people at your fingertips who are ready to support your book. All right, let's talk about that. Let's talk about what the asks are. Is it a podcast? Is it a blurb? Is it mentioned on their social? When is the best time to do that? So these are the conversations we were honestly, guys, having informally that we started to make more formal, more with documentation, with better conversations, rather than, oh, by the way, I noticed that this could be. Let's be more proactive with this information. So that's something that we solidified during the dark days of COVID. And then what we do now is it's pretty much standard with our publicity options, that we start maybe 3 months, 6 months before we begin media outreach, if we have the luxury of that timing, to help have those conversations, to guide them. Now, we're not website executors, or we're not social media executors, but we tell them, these are the kind of strategies that we hope that you have in place. So that's one thing that we did during the slowdown of people like, oh, should I be investing in publicity? What is this going to be doing now? That we could help them in other ways.
Nice. What do you think it was about, the shift that was happening as a result of COVID that made you go there? Do you think it was more time, or just trying to think outside the box, or like what brought you there, do you think?
Sandy, would part of it be part of what prompted us a bit was the supply chain problems with
more time.
Pub dates being pushed and pushed and pushed.
Yeah.
But in developing the consulting, which Sandy led the development of it, or the formalization of it, that consulting could often take place during these delays in pub times because of the supply chain. Would that be accurate, Sandy?
Absolutely. Oh gosh, I completely forgot about the
I was going to say, we got to talk about that.
of paper printing, especially with the smaller publishers that we'd be working with, where the big guys got priority on the printing presses, right?
Sure.
And so what do we do in the meantime? They've already kind of had this groundswell of interest in the book. What are some of the things that we could do? So that was absolutely part of the pivoting that we had to do during COVID. And it was also the rise, which I was thrilled about, the rise of sharing PDFs instead of print books for reviewers and media, because it just, one, it costs a lot less money. We're saving on trees for people, let's face it, who aren't buying the book or likely going to keep it. And it gives, so it saves on postage, it saves on time. And if there is something that the author is changing in the book, they could easily update it and send the new version the next day if needed.
Sure.
So back before COVID, I would say 90% of the media wanted a physical copy of the book. And now that switch where maybe we used to ask for, 50, 75, 100 copies of a book. Now we're asking for 15 or 20 copies, and it's great.
Wow, that's incredible. Yeah, that's quite a shift.
And it's a huge shift, and I hope it remains, because it just is so much more efficient and cost savings for the authors and publishers, and us too, because we're not handling as many books. The post office might not like it, but I think it's a win for everybody else.
Yeah, and just so our audience is clear, when she's talking about those 50 to 75 books you used to order, you're talking about advanced reader copies.
Yes, or even final copies, because that's another shift in the industry too, is that publishers are not always producing printed versions of advanced reader copies or galleys. So
that's great.
So it is, but because it's expensive and without the printers being available, it just wasn't an option to have printed versions of these books. So having a PDF to share safely, and we of course put them up on our favorite NetGalley. We can talk a little bit about what NetGalley is and how authors use that.
Let's do that.
NetGalley. I think we were one of the first. I can't even remember how long we've been using NetGalley, but we were one of the first publicity agencies to kind of embrace the technology. We were like the beta testers back in the day. But what NetGalley is we upload a PDF or some version of the book. There's usually 3 or 4 different formats that they're asking for better legibility on the user end. But it's an electronic version of the book that librarians, bookstore owners, bloggers, book reviewers, media can see that this book is available. And of course, we have wonderful author descriptions and the genre and why this book could be interesting to different audiences. And then if a NetGalley user, again, somebody who's interested in reviewing or recommending books, is interested in the book, we can give access to download the book for a potential review or recommendation. So NetGalley is a huge asset in the publishing world, and it has helped boost discoverability for many, many books. Typically, NetGalley is a little more friendlier to fiction and fiction books rather than the dry nonfiction mergers and acquisition, 101. So it's a little bit more consumer friendly. There's definitely nonfiction is still great, and we certainly have a lot of success there, but it's really exciting for the fiction world.
In my experience, NetGalley was really expensive. So to have an account on NetGalley, I mean, you pay quite a bit. Is that still the case, or is it a little bit more accessible these days?
Well, back when it first started, they did not want individual authors coming directly to them. And and I said, but why? But it made sense because the amount of technical training they would have to do to get the book cover, to help people upload the author headshots and all the different versions of the book, the EPUB, the MOBI, the PDF, and what that meant. And if the files were too big, especially for children's books, there was file size limitations. So they really only wanted professional users to be in charge of uploading and approving requests and all that good stuff. So I'm actually not sure if individual authors can go to NetGalley and have an account, but a lot of times they'll work through IBPA. That you can get some NetGalley exposure through there, or going through, or your publisher, or of course going through an agency like us to manage the NetGalley presence there. So it's definitely an investment on our end, and we can have, oh gosh, I'm not even sure how many books we can have at a time, maybe 20, 25 books that we have up at any one time. But there's also investments in cover love and cover reveals, and they have newsletters for different themes. I remember one year there was a baseball theme, so they put all the baseball books into a newsletter and sent it out to people who might have checked that they like sports books. So they really do a great job in getting your book in front of people who are interested in very specific genres.
Nice. And I have a NetGalley account because of the podcast. So I get a lot of my arcs through NetGalley.
Oh,
which is
lucky
cool.
You.
Yeah, it's cool. And I can go on and I can request books. I can say, hey, I'm very interested in this, and I can request it from the publisher or whoever's account it is. And most of the time I'd get the copy. They look at your account and see if they want to actually give you a copy, or if it makes sense. And usually I get one. Yeah.
Yeah, we can pre-approve. We can pre-approve people, so we know they're legit, and so they don't even have to ask. They can just download it. But we're pretty particular of just the general public, because we don't want to give away the book to people who aren't kind of a professional reader. So there you go.
Yeah, exactly. You mentioned something that I think is important to just take a quick step back. You mentioned IBPA. Such a wonderful organization, and so many opportunities for promotion and just learning about book publishing and independent publishing. Independent Book Publishers Association. For our listeners out there, check it out. Independent Book Publishers Association. The URL is ibpa-online.org. So, all right. Awesome.
And you're pretty active at IBPA, aren't you?
I am. Yeah. I teach classes online, and also the conference is going to be in San Diego, in Coronado, actually, for the first time in my lifetime, because I've been speaking at IBPA since 2005.
Wow.
And
we have some people going to that, right, Sandy?
Yeah,
we sure do. Kelly Rendina, who is going to be speaking there she's so excited to go to she's like, should I go to the zoo in my downtime? What should I do? Because she's just excited.
I have to email her, because this is my city. Yeah.
Yes.
You guys are so great at making us feel welcome when we come to your coast. So you're coming to our coast. We're going to talk about this. And yes to the zoo.
Yes. yes to the zoo. So she's going to be speaking at the event, I guess, in just a few weeks. But even next week, we have some folks going to the London Book Fair, which we're just so excited for these in-person opportunities again.
It's so weird going out into public and being a part of events. It's like electric. It's thrilling. It's like, oh my God, I'm with you. I'm with you, other humans. And here I am out in the world, It's like, I think we need it, right?
Absolutely. Just the energy that you get in person.
Absolutely.
Did you do the, I think they called it like the book trade show that Publishers Weekly put on? I think they did it 2021. I don't think they did it in 2020. We did it, and we designed a virtual booth, and it was kind of a fun but crazy experience. I don't know if you did. I can't remember. It was the name of it was like the book show or something.
I did not.
Well, the U.S. Book Fair, maybe, or something like that.
Yes. It was. I felt like we were in a movie, as you could walk through virtually and go hang out in this room or go see. Wow. Yeah, it was interesting.
I attended quite a few virtual conferences, and some of them are really well done. And just thinking outside the box to get people to actually engage and interact, even though they're at home in front of a computer, I still had that sense of camaraderie, right? And networking and meeting people. And there was still some very exciting events, but you had to get people to take a step further, not just attend and just watch, but, actually engage. And they had contests. In fact, IBPA did a virtual conference that was really well done, an opportunity for people to meet each other. And there was like a hangout room where people could talk to each other. And it felt good. Like it's what we had, and that's great. I do think in person's better, but and the IBPA conference is coming up. It's Publishing University. It's happening the 5th, 6th, and 7th. Well, actually, I think it's the 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th here in Coronado. So people should definitely check that out. And then they can meet Kelly and meet me in person if you haven't met me. I'll be there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think one of the other things that COVID did is it brought organizations together. In terms of networking with each other and raising visibility to, events that we kind of collaborate or co-market or, promoting that networking and that sense of community was so much even more important than it was before.
Absolutely. And I think COVID, and especially from our author's perspective, people were generous. People were giving away. Okay, I'm doubling down. I'm giving away webinars for free, seminars for free, workbooks for free, books for free, and trying to kind of give back and be kind to their fellow humans during that time. And I know there's obviously sometimes a branding, and I want to be seen as someone who is giving back, but the people I talked to, Jennifer, it went deeper than that. They really wanted to feel like they were doing something positive for their communities.
Definitely. Yeah. No, I got a lot of that too. I think people were digging a little deeper into their empathy bucket, if you will, because we were all feeling hurt and lost and scared. Frankly, it was a scary time. It's still scary, right?
It sure is.
Although
the other thing,
I think yesterday, the president officially declared COVID emergency over.
Yeah.
So no more emergency funding.
Yeah. 3 years later, it's officially over.
It's done.
Yay.
Yeah.
We've eradicated it.
Yeah. Oh
yay. Excellent. Good. Done. Over. But one of the other things that came out of COVID, and we kind of laughed at it during the time, is the surge in new books. People were home and writing. Did you see that? And your work and your end of the world, that 2021 was a busy year for new books.
Absolutely. In fact, just 2 days ago, I interviewed Susanna Hoffs of the Bangles. You may have heard of her.
Ooh, yes.
Yeah.
And she just released her debut novel, This Bird Has Flown. And she said, it was because of COVID that I was able to finally finish this book. And a lot of authors that I've talked to, have said the same thing. I had this time to actually finally do something. So I think people either renovated their homes, redid their landscaping, or they wrote a book, right? Or a screenplay, or, they finally did that passion creative project. How much would you say that you got busier because of those types of projects, or how much did you see that in your world?
100%, right, Dan? 2021 was our busiest year.
I think overall our best year ever, I think.
Yeah.
2022
was close, but it was unprecedented, the number of authors that were coming out with books, and many of them were because they weren't traveling. Yeah. They had a lot more time to think and reflect and to tap into whether it was something creative or messages that they were just excited to get out to the world.
And I don't know if it was interesting in 2022, and maybe it was COVID fatigue had set it in or something, but at least for our business, the beginning of 2022 was really scary in terms of the drop off in business. If you remember, Sandy, we had a significant drop off, and we ended up, recovering and doing great. But I don't know what caused that. I don't know. Like I said, maybe it's COVID fatigue or supply chain, issues just finally hit a boiling point or something.
Well, what's
market
interesting
volatility.
Well, exactly, Chad. Talking to some of my business authors, one of them said it so perfectly, is that we went through a decade of normal business cycles all in like 12 to 18 months. So the volatility, we're in a recession. We're not in a recession.
Yeah, that's what the recession
and I see it through the lens of my son, who graduated from college in 2020. He had 3 or 4 job prospects and almost, real offers in January, February, as he was leading to graduation and interviews. They all dried up in 2020, right?
Wow.
And then he struggled. He did some internship work from home, but it was really hard. Then he got a job in 2021. It wasn't a great job. And then all of a sudden, at the end of 2021, companies were throwing stupid money at these college graduates because there was such a shortage. People were laid off, then people came back to work, and the salaries were crazy high. And then and it just that whole volatility and what that does for the publishing world, what it does for authors' budgets and their planning. So it was interesting that this business leadership author was saying, that people have gone through such crazy changes in their own finances, their own job prospects, which does impact people who buy books. TikTok became a household word during COVID, and what that has done to the book world, for example, like all these shifts, all these changes that, as this person said, usually go through a 10-year cycle, went through a 12 to 18 month cycle, and people kind of had a little bit of whiplash. Just, where do I spend my time? Where do I spend my money? Totally. What should I be doing? Should I be doing? Should I be renovating my bathroom, buying a second house, getting a new mortgage, refinancing, not refinancing? Writing this book, not writing this book.
But Chad, I think you hit it right on the head. It is, as we're talking about, was the volatility and the uncertainty that was in the, everywhere. And I remember having, our executive meetings, and we were talking about how all this talk about the economy and the R word, recession. People started for a period of time holding on to their money, and obviously that contributes to a recession in and of itself.
Exactly.
When people hold their money and aren't spending it. So I think you're right, Chad. It was because I remember specifically talking about in these meetings that this economy uncertainty is killing us, but then it got better. So.
Yeah, and for no real good reason that I could see, right?
No,
it's like people just
really.
like, oh, well, okay. I'm going to go about my life. I'm done being scared.
It just shows you that it's all a construct, right?
It kind of is, yeah.
Nothing is real.
No, not at least of all money.
Exactly.
Oh, yes.
We've escaped the matrix, right?
So. I think we actually all are part of the matrix, and we're just getting closer and closer to the heart of it. Let's talk about that, actually. Let's talk about social media.
Speaking of the Matrix.
Yeah, gosh. Speaking of getting sucked in, I guess.
My entire life, it's been, you're headed towards 1984. You're headed towards 1984. Well, turns out we're headed to a brave new world.
Yeah.
So we're all going there willingly.
Oh, gosh.
And apparently a little bit of Fahrenheit 451 thrown in. So
seriously. Sandy's like, oh my gosh. You turn. Although the book banning situation is pretty scary. Definitely. But let's talk about social media. We could go in a totally different direction with this podcast, but we don't have time for that. We don't have time for that. Well, I mean, I feel like, there's so much good about social media because it brings awareness, but then it's such a glut. Like, it's so hard. The fatigue around social, I think, is huge. And for authors in particular, it's like, how do I use this to my advantage? And I watched an author get on Twitter. She was told, you need 10,000 followers, right? If you're going to get noticed by an agent, or if you're going to have any kind of platform. So she worked her ass off. She was on Twitter, I would say 20 times a day posting, and she did get 10,000 followers. But did that result in any book sales or actual readers? No. So how much time did she waste doing something because she was told you have to have 10,000 followers? And I feel like we need a bit of a reality check, and we need to help authors realize that we need a strategy and a plan. And is social for everyone? Maybe not. Is it possible to sell books without a huge social following? I think it is, but I'm curious what you guys think.
Well, I remember, and Sandy, again, you would know better. You're much more in the trenches still than I am, but that certain podcast, and it may still be this way, I don't know, shows or publications would not
are even better.
Would not, but they would not interview someone if they didn't have 10,000 followers. Is
right.
that accurate, Sandy?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's actually shifting a bit too. Now, you could have credentials, especially academic credentials, to go on a show, but with some podcasts, they're looking for other people who have new audiences, so that they can, when the show airs, that it's going to be broadcast, that they're going to share the link, and my podcast is going to be now listened to by brand new people, and that's exciting, because you have to, from a media perspective, you have to think about how the journalists are judged, and it's by how many people are clicking, how many people are sharing and commenting. So the more prominent guests that they're featuring, the more likely that their click-through rates and their views and eyes are going to grow, because the person they're featuring has a strong following. However, I do think that that's changing a bit. Not so much that they're still kind of judged that way, but it goes back to content and audience. And we are seeing more opportunities for people who understand, and I know, Jennifer, we've talked about this in the past, who their who their book is for, who their brand is for. When people say it's for everybody, it's for nobody.
The kiss of death.
The kiss of death. They're like, oh, we don't want to hear that. So instead of being on every single social platform out there, that's typically not a great strategy, because it's the same thing. You're not there for everybody, for everything. And if you are going to be on social, we'd rather see you dive in deep into one platform, maybe two platforms, because it takes a lot of time to do it authentically. I just saw an article in the New York Times this morning about how influencers are going back to 9-to-5 jobs because they're realizing it's a lot of
less work. Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, I just saw that today. So when people say to me, should I start Twitter? I'm like, well, if you were going to, you should to promote your book that's coming out in 4 months.
You
should have
2005.
Yeah.
Exactly. But if to be on Twitter, like you said, experts say you got to tweet 7 to 10 times a day, 7 days a week, and quite frankly, that's not great for most people's personality or time. But if you can find where your target audience are that they're sharing ideas, and go on there, once or twice a week, and we can help them with strategies that's authentic to who they are, that they're enjoying it, and they're supporting other authors, other people sharing topics that are passionate to them. Then it's not a job; it's part of what they might naturally be doing, and that's where they're going to find their network. But we also do say, and we're hearing reports from our authors, that the most successful way that they're building their network is through their own email lists. And that sets up the stage for their next book and their next book and their next book.
That's
and
right.
that they can use social as a spoke, right? But it's their website, it's their own brand that they can control. And sharing relevant information about their work, about their book, that we're seeing that authors are reporting back to us are what's actually important in book sales and in building their brand and their network.
And
Absolutely.
Jennifer, Sandy mentioned TikTok, and it is undeniably very powerful and can be hugely effective for some authors. But I have to be the old man coming out of the woods saying, I can't stand it. I think it's the bane of our existence. It's going to lead to the end of the world. But it is, there's this talk of, the government's going to ban it. I don't know why. I don't understand that, but I'm thinking, I'm being a little sarcastic, but I wouldn't mind. But it is deliberately addictive, and
Yeah.
I just can't stand it. But I thought I'd throw that in there.
There's just too many socialists there for the government to be comfortable with
That's right.
That's true.
And I actually love TikTok. It's my favorite social platform. So there you go. I learn so much every day. So there we go. There's the two opposing views of TikTok.
Yeah.
I get book recommendations. I am on such weird things, and which I love about TikTok. I get Excel pivot table tips. Like, wow, this is really fantastic. From recipes to weird cat videos to some news, and it's just mindless. But it's not mindless in that I am learning a ton of stuff that's just important to me.
Yeah, I can attest to that. It absolutely can be, amazingly powerful, and Sandy does get a lot of information from it. I just it's just not for me, but I don't deny how useful it can be.
But from a book perspective, boy, Colleen Hoover, let's just say her name.
Yeah.
And what TikTok did for her career in the backlist titles. It was wonderful to see authors sell billions of dollars a book through regular people recommending their titles. It was wonderful to see.
Yeah.
And like Sandy said, I think a key point with TikTok or any of them, I've talked with people and they say, I'm going to go become an influencer on TikTok or promote my book on TikTok. And they many of them do not realize how much hard work goes in to these people who are successful at these being influencers or promoting something. It's, as Sandy alluded to before, it is so much work to do it right and to become successful. And I think a lot of people just think they can go on there and start talking about something and they'll become influencers. But it's a lot of work.
Yeah, it really is. It's exhausting. But it's powerful.
It is. I have a good friend whose daughter is well before TikTok is a very, very successful influencer in her field. And people say, "Oh, that's all you do is do YouTube videos." And she always says, "Go ahead, you do it. You can do it too."
Yeah, you want to write a script, you want to video it, you want to edit it.
Yeah. And do it 4 times a week and do it's amazing how much work, and she's extraordinarily successful brand wise and financially. It's like, but no one's stopping you. Go ahead.
You were going to say something, Chad. You were going to add to that.
Oh, I was going to talk about like if we used any of those like 10,000 followers metrics to allow someone onto the podcast. I mean, we wouldn't have had amazing interviews with, say, like Elisa C. or Sigrid Nunez or like any other amazing best-selling author.
Yeah.
Like these people have sold millions of books and have like 200 followers on any given platform, presumably because they're, spending their time writing books. But.
Yeah. That is the interesting thing. When I'm guiding, our authors on social and giving advice on that, don't look at the top selling authors because they're not a good marker for what's happening on social. You actually want to look at like mid-level people who are building. Because the Lee Childs and the James Pattersons and, the Sue Monk kids don't need to be on social necessarily. They've already built their audience.
Right.
So, you have to kind of look a couple steps down in terms of, book sales for someone who's got an audience and is really, Colleen Hoover took off like crazy, but that was all about her fans. That wasn't about her efforts.
No, and her backlist and just people word of mouth recommendation.
Yeah.
But it's such a great point. Is that years ago people would say, "I want to be the next." Let's fill in the blank. Dan Brown.
Yeah.
John Grisham. Whoever the person in the news was. But that's not where you start, right? That's not that's. You have to look at people who are more where you were.
You reverse engineer, right?
Yeah. Reverse engineer it, yes, and see it and see how their path to moving up that list and moving up in success.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, right. So like you look at a book and say, okay, well, what are we recommending? What is similar to this, but not quite as popular? Where are they? Who do they follow? I mean, all of the data is out there. Figuring out your roadmap to success it's already out there. We don't have to reinvent any wheels. And in fact, if you have to, there's a problem. That means there's not an audience for your book, right?
Right. Or maybe could you ask some of the AI software,
let's talk about AI. I was just going to go there, writing scripts. So Dan and I were talking about this in the green room before, about it's exciting and scary at the same time. What do you guys think? I know Chad has an opinion.
We've just, Sandy and I have, and I think a few others in our company have just started to really dive into it to see. And again, it's part of like what you do and what any business does, kind of try to, if not stay ahead of the curve, stay with the curve.
Mm-hmm.
But it is, it's freaky to me. It's frightening, but it's amazing. It's been, and everything I've been reading.
See, we're all going to be back in the Matrix. We're all heading back in the Matrix.
and everything, and just in the last couple of days, I've really dove into it. And from the experts that I've read, it's not surprising that it is going to be very helpful for a lot of businesses, but it's not going to be the end all be all and replace, the human intellect and the human elements of what goes on. Yeah, but it's definitely going to help, but it's not going to like destroy our world.
I was at the Romance Writers of Southern California meeting just last week. And a couple of the people were talking about how when they're stuck in a spot, they've been using ChatGPT to like move ahead and then make it their own. And I wonder how many authors are going to do this, right? And I also heard of this example where an entire class of students, separate from each other, handed in a term paper, and they were all so similar that basically they all used ChatGPT to write their essay, and they all got caught.
I guess that's, I often think about that. We have a son who's a sophomore, who we mentioned before. And I guess I'm thinking, how do you stop that? But I guess one way to do it is you write the paper in the class. So you can't do it. But because you can have an entire term paper written, instantly. It's crazy.
It's crazy.
But I think authors... Go ahead, Chad. Sorry.
I was just going to say, for me, it's... when I was a kid, people are like, you're never going to have a calculator on you.
Right.
Well, I'm walking around with a freaking supercomputer in my pocket. So having artificial intelligence like a ChatGPT or the Google one or the Adobe one or whichever one it seems like math classes allow calculators now. At a certain point, why not allow access to an AI that is writing your paper and then you fine tune it?
Yeah.
Because
it's interesting.
That's where life is headed. Mm-hmm. And if we expect to, get beyond where we currently are, whatever that beyond looks like, we're going to have to use everything available to us.
I read something fascinating where they were saying that they're developing an AI tool that can determine if something was written using AI.
Right.
So,
interesting.
Well, of course.
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. Huh.
But I see it as a great tool for authors, and potentially when you're looking at different book titles as a brainstorming. And the term I recently learned is called a level 1 like research, a baseline, where it's like, okay, I want to write a book about XYZ, ABC. What are some titles? And it could help you with the brainstorming. Now, a human's going to pick the right title, but at least it's a starting point. And I just went to, and Dan attended to, an agency AI workshop last week to really learn how other people are starting to harness this kind of exciting tool. It could be exciting and it's scary and it's just the unknown. And one of the things they talked about was the adoption rate, when they had a chart where it said it took Netflix 3 years to get to 1 million users. And some of these, chat IA tools, it took 5 days to get to 1 million users.
Wow.
So the adoption is, people are just excited to dive into this, but it just allows, from an author perspective, whether I just talked to an author who, and her book was on the cover of Publishers Weekly, where the cover was generated 100% by artificial intelligence, and it's a beautiful, striking cover. And part of her book, she's an AI expert, and it's a memoir career type of book. But it just allows for some creativity. And I look at it kind of, Chad, to your point. I started my career as a graphic designer. Computer graphics were just starting. I won't say
that's cool.
Say how old I was, but computer graphics were just, people were just getting to use computers for graphics. So when I took a typography class, we were looking at books of typography and the size and picas and points and
right.
when you did an ad, you didn't see what it looked like. You had to give a formula for the size and the type and the specs, and you would send it out and you would come back to see what the ad might look like. And I was still in school when we started, using PageMaker, and I worked for a company called Advanced Computer Graphics, and we're a beta company. Now, the same thing, we were able to more quickly design. I worked for Nike, and we were doing their sales flyers, and the pump sneaker was the rage. Now, but it's
awesome.
So we still had these tools, but it was still very much a human who was deciding what to put on the page, and having these tools just sped up the process, gave us more options, and made our job a heck of a lot easier and more fun. So I'm hoping that's what authors will be able to see with AI.
Yeah.
Yeah. So workers' output doubled, but the compensation was not doubled, I'm guessing.
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, you're able to do twice the amount of work within the same amount of time as you were if you were doing the old manual method.
Oh, but you're not making twice the money.
But you're not making twice the amount of money.
That's true.
No, but also, could you charge the client half the amount? So that's what's interesting is.
Well, that's kind of what happened with graphic design, actually.
Yeah, and photography, and yeah.
Right.
It's a race to the bottom at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So I'm just hoping these tools that we're just starting to scratch the surface of will help authors to be more creative and to have input from different sources, because sometimes it's hard to see beyond, like what are 10 competitive titles from my book? Let's put this in here and ask and see what comes up, and be inspired for that reverse engineering conversation, for example.
I love that.
So
yeah.
So
that's cool.
So while it's scary, it excites me to see what it can do to help people, and like the calculator in your pocket. It's that same analogy of, let's see what it can do to make my life easier.
Yeah.
Well, and you've got the one guy who just did a children's book. It's completely AI. And there was a hell of a backlash from that.
The story and the cover.
And all the illustrations inside.
And the illustrations. Okay, so picture book. Wow.
Yeah, picture book.
Well, this is an interesting conversation. We'll see what happens. But, Dan, Sandy, I got to say, I love that you're excited about it, Sandy, because I think that's why you're at the forefront of, innovation when it comes to new and unique ideas to, for book publicity and getting visibility for authors. That's just really what you guys have always excelled at. And this just, echoes that in my mind. Thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate having you here.
Oh, thank you, Jennifer. Chad, it is such a pleasure to talk with you both, and to just explore what's happening in this crazy, great, exciting world of publishing.
Absolutely. Dear listener, you can learn more about Smith Publicity and their services at smithpublicity.com. Be sure to subscribe to their newsletter. They have amazing, wonderful information and, things you can glean from it, just doing your own publicity. Definitely listen to their podcast and follow them on social. Again, that's smithpublicity.com. This has been another episode of The Premise. Visit us online at thepremisepod.com. Follow us on Twitter at podpremise, and subscribe and rate us wherever you get your podcasts. It all helps. Until next week, thanks for listening. Goodbye.
Goodbye.